Good afternoon and welcome to this session. Today we're going to be discussing about how young Europeans can discover the European Union while polluting less. Today, this year, is the year of rail, the European year of rail, but actually we were wondering whether railway is actually the greenest means of transport. And for that, we're going to have a discussion with representatives from all the transport industries, from aircraft to road, but also railway. And we're going to be discussing about all the many ways in which they are making the transport in their industry more sustainable. But we also want to hear from you. We want to know what you would like to know from them. This is a great opportunity. Are you not motivated enough to ask a question? No worries. We have a treat for you. You can actually win an Interrail Pass to travel all across the European Union after these months at home for free. And the only thing that you need to know is ask a question. We're going to be selecting the 3 best, most interesting questions, and those are going to win the pass. I will explain to you later what kind of questions we're searching for, but before the debate, I also would like to give the floor to someone who has been very important in keeping together the DiscoverEU project. She's our special guest, and she's also a youth expert. Please welcome here today, Karen van der Weggen.
Thank you, Beatrice. I'm glad to be here with you today to talk about a European project that is very close to my heart, which is DiscoverEU. And it's also a project in line with the zero pollution theme of the European Green Week. And at the European Commission, we are working hard to make Europe greener. And in order to achieve this, we would like to involve young people as much as possible. Because on several occasions, young people have shown that they are at the forefront of taking action for future societal changes. For example, they were the first to raise their voice about climate change. And so they need to be supported in these actions to become active and responsible citizens. And that is why we give them the opportunity to participate in projects linked to sustainability, and DiscoverEU is one of these projects. What is DiscoverEU? DiscoverEU started 3 years ago in 2018, and the aim is to give 18 years old Europeans the chance to travel across Europe, mainly by rail. So how do they apply? There is an application period, and all they have to do is to log in on the European Youth Portal. They fill in 5 easy questions about European Union, and when they are selected, they win a travel pass. So it's basically an Interrail Pass, a rail pass, but there are certain exceptions for those young people living in remote areas or on islands. And with this rail pass, they can travel between 1 up to 30 days. And when we launched the project, we did not imagine that in total 350,000 young people would apply during one of the 4 application rounds that took place. But that is what happened. And following the success, DiscoverEU has been integrated into the new Erasmus Plus program. So the new program of Erasmus Plus started this year in 2021 and will continue until 2027. And so this means that thousands of young people will have the chance to take part in DiscoverEU. I also want to highlight the green dimension within Erasmus Plus program, because this is one of the key priorities of the new program, together with social inclusion and the digital transition. And so projects are encouraged to incorporate green practices in their projects, and also the program offers many opportunities to participants to acquire skills on sustainable practices or environmentally friendly approaches. And as Erasmus Plus deals with the mobility of learners, it has to lead by example. So it promotes green traveling, and in that sense, DiscoverEU plays an important role. But you can ask the question, are we successful in kind of encouraging young people, these 18 years old, to use greener modes of transport? We feel that it seems to work. So we notice in the post-travel survey that young people have to fill in after their DiscoverEU experience that more than 90% of the young people say that they would use rail as a means of transport for the future travels within the European Union. We also see that young people use the travel pass not only to explore the cultural diversity of the European Union or to meet with friends. We see that they love to experience nature, and often they go camping. And I would like to give here an example of a young DiscoverEU traveler, Dan from the Czech Republic, and he used his travel pass to go to Chamonix to visit a glacier. And he said in his testimonial after his trip that this has changed his view on global warming because he could see with his own eyes the melting of the glacier. In the program, we constantly aim to make the program greener. So for the next round, we will move from a paper pass towards a digital pass. And also we provide information to the young people on green, sustainable travel. So we organize green contests on our social media channels, which are the European Youth Instagram and European Youth Facebook page. And I would like to encourage you to follow these channels. We also provide information on sustainable travel in the DiscoverEU Facebook group, which is a group for the 18-year-old participants to connect with each other, to exchange information, to arrange meetings between them. And now we are developing a green travel route. So it will be published on the European Youth Portal. And this green travel route will highlight cities that are dedicated to become greener. So we hope that it will inspire future DiscoverEU participants to visit these cities as part of their DiscoverEU trip. Unfortunately, due to the COVID crisis, traveling was interrupted, so we could not organize any application round in 2020, but we're hopeful. We see that travel might slowly resume, and our plan is to launch a new application round in October 2021. So this time for 60,000 travel passes. So we would like to encourage everyone who is 18 years old or who knows a friend or a family member who is 18 years old to apply. So they should keep a close eye on the European Youth Portal, where we will post information once the next round will be confirmed. And I thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for that, Karen. So if you're 18 years old and you would like to discover the European Union, make sure that you keep an eye on the website of the European Commission in October this year, and that you also follow us today to understand a little bit better about what are the initiatives in terms of making transport more sustainable and how you can be part of that wave as well. Before we jump into the conversation, I would like to share with you, so if you would like to be part of this chat that we're going to have today, but you don't have questions, but you have comments, you can share them on social media, and the hashtag that you can use is either DiscoverEU, EU GreenWeek, of course, or EU Year of Rail. Now, I told you before that you can win an Interrail Pass by asking questions today. You know that we have a Slido available, so you can share them there. What we're looking for is two things. First of all, a question that is very sharp, very on point, and that creates a lot of debate between our speakers. And second, a question that actually all of them can reply, because the idea is to have an actual discussion here, because we are so grateful that they were joining us today for this talk. But we really, really want to hear from you. So make sure that you share your questions on a Slido. I will make sure that I check them. We're going to have a judge of the European Commission looking into all those questions and selecting the best ones that are going to be the ones that get the prize. So make sure that you ask your question. Now, to have a debate, what do we need? Speakers. So I'm going to introduce to you who are going to be the people that we're going to have today on the studio to have this talk. And first of all, I would like to introduce to you Luc Tiget, who is Executive Director at the European Union Aviation Safety Agency. Hello, Luc. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello.
Thanks so much.
Good afternoon.
Now, I would like to introduce as well Joseph Doppelbauer, who is the Executive Director of the European Union Safety Agency. Thank you so much for joining today. And virtually joining us today is also Sigrid de Vries, who is the Secretary-General of the European Association of Automotive Suppliers. Thank you so much for joining us today, all of you, for being with us. Now, before we actually let the public ask you questions, I do have a question. And now, this is how it's going to work. I'm going to ask a question first to Luc, and then to Joseph, then to Sigrid. And what I want is for you to answer in just 3 minutes. And I'm going to use a timer, so I'm going to stop you for sure. And that question is, what is your industry doing to make sure that your means of transport is more sustainable? So I want to start with aircrafts and Luc, and I'm going to put the timer
I mean, the 3 minutes too short. There are so many things going on today, which are in fact aiming at going to zero emission. And we have, for example, the change of the type of aircraft. The new aircraft will be greener and will have new type of engines we want to certify to be as close as possible to the zero emission. And we are starting by putting the certification requirements on the Airbus manufacturing industry very strong, and also, of course, on Boeing and the others. What we are also doing is starting to certify electric aircraft today. But we have also now starting to certify hydrogen aircraft. This is start now. But this is not all. We would like also to inject now as another way to reduce pollution, to have seen produce sustainable aviation fuel. And this is coming on the market, and we want also to certify it to be closest to the objective of meeting the less emission vis-à-vis Paris Agreement, and also the objective of 2030. Also, the air traffic controllers will have to comply with that. They will have to offer to pilots new trajectories, which will be greener, which will be more shortcut to the destination, therefore having less miles to fly. And last but not least, of course, on board the plane, there will be no plastic anymore, and this is very important. And last element also our agency is doing is to inform the future passengers what type of flight will be the greenest one. We will have established a comparison of the different flight possibilities which we offer to you, and you will have the full transparency on the way the flight will be operated. That is what we want. This is our commitment to offer to the students, but also any citizens, to fly in DiscoverEU in the future.
Brilliant, and you didn't even use the 3 minutes. Indeed, I think you point on a lot of issues that we're going to be discussing today, and it's this question of not only transparency, but all the work that the industry is doing to make sure that there is a more sustainable means of transport within the industry itself. So now I'm going to have to ask the exact same question to Joseph. What are you doing in the railway sector to make sure that your means of transport is more sustainable?
Thank you very much, Beatrice. And I have to say that railway is already a very environmentally friendly mode of transport. The problem is that not enough people and not enough freight are using rail as transport mode. So one of the most important actions for rail is actually to make rail more attractive, make it more attractive for passengers, and in particular, make it more attractive for young passengers. Now, if we look at what Luc just said from aviation, the second important action on the railway side is actually to combine the modes of transport to make it possible to use the most environmentally and the most attractive mode of transport for the part of your travel. That means we should link rail and aircraft, meaning all major European airports should be connected to the rail network so that we could avoid on short distances to take a flight, but at the same time make aircraft and air travel more attractive. Last but not least, I believe we also need to make sure that rail itself exploits the full potential, meaning that we electrify the railway system in totality. Where it is not possible, we should make use of batteries and possibly also hydrogen, which is, by the way, a technology that is also explored for being used in the aerospace industry.
Thank you so much. I actually see that there is a lot of possibilities for collaboration between the different sectors, and that's also very important and very interesting to look into. Now I'm going to give for the last word the floor to Sigrid, and I'm going to ask her the same question. What are you doing in the road sector to make sure that transport is more sustainable?
Yes, hello everyone. Great to be with you today. Well, automotive suppliers design and manufacture all of the components and systems that are needed to achieve the ambitious goals for transport. So it's really a pleasure also to be with you and to take you through some of our views. Our sector is an innovation powerhouse, really important also for Europe in terms of innovation and jobs. 1.7 million people work there, very exciting place to work, also for young people. So I make a little bit of promotion for that here too. Very diverse. There are about 30,000 different parts and systems in a vehicle. And that goes really from, powertrains, engines, so everything that needs to become green, but also the interiors or the onboard computers or safety technologies, very, very diverse. And we're really in the front line of the mobility transformation that we're going through as society, as economy, and also as industry. And zero emissions, of course, is a main target, but there are others too. It's all about digitalization, and it's also about making the roads safer for vehicles, but also especially for more vulnerable road users. I'd like to say a few things about the importance of transport and mobility, because I think also the recent economic and health challenges have re-emphasized the role that transport plays for society at large. And we all get our parcels delivered at our doorsteps through mobility. And we also cherish, I think, our personal mobility, because it makes us feel safe and independent, and it offers high flexibility. So we really need to work together to ensure that mobility and transport remain accessible and affordable for all. And that's often also a combination of different means of transport. It needs to be safe, sustainable, smart, and affordable. And that's really because people's habits also change with how and where they live and work, or what age they are, what stage they are in their lives. Personal mobility will continue to be one of the foundations of well-functioning societies. And there will be increasingly more options than we have today, whether it's car ownership or car sharing, ride-hailing, or whole new ranges of public transportation offerings. As regards zero emissions, automotive suppliers are strong advocates of an end-to-end strategy. That means rapid electrification of the car fleet with clean batteries and renewable energy, but also with clean combustion technology with the use of renewable fuels. If we're serious about reaching the climate targets, we must use all technologies available. And it's not so much the type of engine that matters most, but ensuring that only green energy fuels all of them. And happy to say a bit more about that later.
Perfect, 3 minutes, amazing. Really, thank you for that. Thank you for that as well, because one of the questions indeed is a question of energy and how we're going to see the transformation over the next few years. And indeed, technology here plays an important role. Before I do a follow-up, which is exactly about these, I would like to remind our viewers that they can also ask questions. We want to hear from you. We want to learn what you would like to know from the industry. What are the questions that are burning in yourself? So share it with them, share them with us on Slido. And again, remember that you can win an Interrail Pass. So you might like to share that question. So in the meantime, I do have questions myself. So about the question of energy and the transformation of the transport sector, we see that the information that we have, the data that we have, feels like the transformation is going to take a few years. So we see that when it comes to electrifications of cars, we're talking about 10 to 15 years. When we talk about the electrification of the aircraft sector, we're talking even about 20 years. The question of hydrogen has been there for quite some time, but we're still struggling with technologies. So I was wondering, do you think that we can have a notable improvement in the coming years, in the short term, or are those solutions going to come out just too late? Maybe, Luc, you can start with this.
Yeah, I think the main source for the solution is the energy. You are completely right. And I was mentioning earlier the importance of promoting the use of sustainable aviation fuel, which is for us really the only way to go towards zero emission. We will not have a big bang to go for today a lot of emission to zero emission. It will have to be done through the use of this new form of energy. And the transformation will of course need to have new type of supply. Of course, for the airport, there will be new way of certification aircraft, but this is all now organized. When we say that there is another transformation which is coming now slowly but surely, it's when we look at the urban mobility, because I think this is also something which is what was said by Joseph. I mean, we have to connect means of transportation. We see a new way of being mobile in the city by having electric solutions which could fly from the airport to downtown without going through a very I would say overloaded ways and roads. So that is another way we want to see a solution. Last but not least, of course, I mean, this hydrogen solution will require a lot of effort. It is not obvious, but there is collective, I would say, agreement among the different actors to start considering it and to get it available and ready in due time. And you must have seen some statement by industry. They want to be ready in order to match. So I think we should be all reassured on this willingness to do that. And I think I also want to echo the collaboration with the railway sector as a main enabler for that.
Absolutely. I want to definitely hear more about that. I would like to hear from you, Joseph. How do you see this? Because we know that obviously rail is way more advanced when it comes to electrification, when it comes to reducing pollution. But can we see important changes in the short term?
Well, as you said, the railways on a technological perspective are already very advanced and have already a very high energy efficiency. But in order to make transport as a whole sustainable, we need a green transport or green logistics chain where we have all the modes integrated. Wherever the transport mode is best suited, we should use the appropriate transport mode. Now, for rail, there is an important activity in improving the attractiveness. And there we need first and foremost to create the connections. We need to connect international cities, the metropolitan areas. We need to connect the airports to the railway network, and we need to offer affordable and attractive services. The recent initiatives with night trains that are now taking on more and more the place again in Europe is going in the right direction. We are also seeing initiatives to recreate efficient intercity connections. But last but not least, Luc referred to it, we shouldn't forget the cities, because 70% of the CO2 that is produced by transport comes from the city. And there, again, it's about efficient integration of transport modes. We need a backbone from the public transport, we need individual mobility, and we need to connect with the long-distance network as offered by aviation.
Absolutely, indeed. Siegfried, I would like to hear from you. What do you think from the side of the road transport? Because as I said before, that transformation is going to take some time. How do you see the sector evolving in the next few years?
Oh, very, very rapidly. I mean, you said in your opening question just now, is it too late? And I definitely don't think it's too late. We see such an acceleration, but we also shouldn't kid ourselves. It's a huge transformation we need to undertake, and it's a very complex one because so many parties need to work together. I mean, if you talk about mobility and the whole mobility ecosystem and how we move about, in this case, it's not just about individual choices for businesses or for consumers. It takes an infrastructure, a digital infrastructure for cars to be connected or vehicles to be connected, also for the logistical change, for traffic to be efficient in terms of how it flows. So, do you have to stop a lot or can you just pass on? Is there a lot of congestion? Technology needs to fit. The physical infrastructure needs to work, and then all of us also need to make different choices and be very aware. So it's very complex, and that will take a bit of time, but I think the mindset is also changing rapidly, so that's coming. From the side of policymakers, whether it's national or local or at EU level, we need also an effective and an efficient framework, because again, the challenge is huge. It needs to be efficient, and we need to really also there work together and make use of all the options that we have. And one of the previous, one of the panelists also just now said it needs to be affordable and attractive. It's not a simple challenge, and we can do it, but I certainly don't think it's too late. And we're really on track. More can be done, let's work together on that.
Absolutely, that's a great message. Let's work all together to make sure that transport becomes more and more sustainable over time. Before I jump into the next question, I think we're experiencing some technical troubles on Slido. You have a limit of characters, so if you were not able to pose your questions just with a single message, we're encouraging you to post 2 of them, just linking them somehow so that our team can actually know that you are actually asking the same question by using some hashtag or something like that. But please share your questions, because we definitely want to hear from you. In the meantime, while you try to assess these issues, I'm going to keep on asking questions myself. And then the second question that I would like to ask to you three is that we've been talking a lot about pollution, but sometimes when we talk about pollution, we disregard noise, air pollution, microplastics, and all the questions that affecting biodiversity. And when it comes to the EU strategy, it actually addresses all these issues as well. And I was wondering whether you take all these into consideration, the effects on biodiversity, the question of noise pollution, when you are actually developing these strategies to make sure that your means of transport is more sustainable. Would you like to go
Yeah,
first?
I mean, yes, this is part of exactly this strategic approach we are having. We are not looking topic per topic. I think it's the idea would be to embrace all the elements all together. And when we certify an engine today, I mean, we don't do it only for noise and then we do it later on another elements. We want to have the full spectrum of the elements which need to be controlled and reduced. So this is in particular true for what we are also calling a non-CO2. In the future, there will be also non-CO2 elements which are coming like the particles. And this is also something which we are now investing a lot of effort to know that this is well understood at the beginning and not later when we have the research done, maybe much too late. And it's important not to take all elements at the same time, but to be sure that we have the full understanding of all elements, that we get quickly to a new solution to organize air travel, embracing the different elements. And I want to put a note on the noise. Yes, the noise is where, I mean, we are working a lot since now more than 15 years in terms of regulator to get it properly also certified, and it's where probably the progress has been remarkable. You see today how aircraft are and the level of noise, if you compare 20 years ago, it's completely different. This type of progress we would like also to be seen in CO2, in particles, in NOx, also to be seen as elements which need to be improved. And when we certify an aircraft, it's with all elements together in order to get it satisfying with what the society is expecting us to put on the market, to accept to put on the market.
Absolutely, it's so important to take all the elements into consideration when developing the strategy, and it's indeed a very good news that we definitely can see the progress over the past few years on particular issues like noise. Maybe you would like to go now, Joseph, on this one?
Well, again, the question of the various factors for the impact of transport on the environment is seen from a holistic perspective in rail as well. And by the way, it's one of the areas where we have very good discussions with our colleagues from EASA, because the environmental performance can also best be solved together. For rail, there is two aspects. The first aspect is the long lifetime of the assets, meaning we take care that we create sustainable products and we develop towards what we call circular economy. And like for aviation, noise is a big issue in rail, in particular for freight trains, and in particular when we want to increase the number of freight trains in order to reduce CO2, but we need to manage noise as well. Like in aviation, a lot of progress has been made. There is new regulation on the way, and by 2024 we will have increased requirements so that we can have the silent freight trains all over Europe, which should also help to make sure that the people who live next to a railway line don't have to pay the price for making Europe greener in terms of CO2 emissions.
Thank you so much for that, because I think you have touched upon two very important points. One of them is the question of circular economy, right? That this is something that all sectors are trying to bring into the way of working. And also the question of legislation, because sometimes we need someone to push so that the sectors can actually develop a little bit farther maybe. But it's good to know that you on your own, you're already developing very interesting strategies. Now I would like to hear from Sigrid as well on this question, and how does she see all these different elements in the strategy to make transport more sustainable, not only question of pollution.
No, definitely very important. I will mention circular economy too, because the automotive industry has actually quite a good track record already there. 95% of a vehicle is today already recycled, which is a really good score and very important, because you can imagine there are a lot of materials going in there, steel, plastic, rubber, also chemicals and substances. So very important that it's well taken care of, and that's in that sense the industry fully supports the circular economy objectives also of the European Commission. It's also important, and you mentioned it before, that we do identify the different emissions that we're talking about. I mean, there's CO2 emissions. They are not toxic. They are part of all of our lives. We need those. It's just that we need to manage the amount of them, of course, very importantly. But still, there are toxic emissions, pollutant emissions, like the particles just mentioned, but also NOx, nitrogen oxides. They also definitely need and are being taken care of. And then there's noise, as you mentioned, a lot of regulation there, a lot of progress made, and more can still be done. But it's also true that with any human activity, there is an impact, and that you can't fully exclude that from our lives. It's about managing it in the best way possible, in a way that benefits society, but also keeps our economies running and keeps also European competitiveness at a good level globally. Because if we can't sustain ourselves because in competing regions things are done in a different way that we may not like very much, but nevertheless, yeah, then we won't be strong and we won't be able to deliver what we need to. So a last point maybe that's important from our point of view, and again also for the longer term, is to go really to a system where there is life cycle assessments. So looking from cradle to grave, to put it in popular terms. So already when designing a vehicle, looking at when it will be recycled at the end. So you can, in your designing process, already take care of recovery of substances, of reducing emissions, and during the manufacturing of these vehicles, that's another issue altogether. You talk biodiversity, also there a lot is happening, whether it's CO2 zero footprint of the manufacturing side, or really making sure that less water is used or less water is wasted, that it's not, there is no emissions and pollutions coming out from that process as well. So I think environmental concerns and requirements are really part of all industrial activity today, and rightly so. And I think not only consumers, but also the financial markets are paying more and more attention to that. So companies are being rewarded actually for being efficient with resources and materials, and for really promoting a sustainable way of doing business. And that's where we're moving all together.
Absolutely, and these work towards balance between making sure that our economy is more sustainable, but then at the same time that we remain ambitious, and so it's just part of the European Green Deal, right? That the European Commission launched a few months ago already, and indeed this is key. Now we have the first winner. We have the first questions coming from our audience. So I'm going to take the time again to recall you that you can ask questions, that we want to hear from you, and that actually you can win a rail pass if you actually get your question selected. And we have the first one, which is how we can make it easier to compare different means of transportation, not just between planes, buses, and rail and trains, but also trains that run in diesel, electricity. And this is the question that we were talking about before, right? The question of labeling and so on. So I want to hear from you. What do you think? How do we do this? How is it better to do it? And also especially making sure that it's not just green washing, but it's actually a proper labeling. Please do go ahead.
I think this is a very, very interesting question. And it's, so again, referring to what has been said earlier by Joseph and also myself. I mean, we are working on a model to inform properly the passengers, the future passengers, on what is the impact on their travel. So we are now establishing metrics which will be comparable between railway and aviation, that you can compare the two. Today it's not possible because we didn't find yet the model, but we are almost there now. We hope before end of this year that there will be a sort of label issue for your flight. So you will see, if you take this flight, it will be more greener than the other one. But you could compare it with railway, and we have agreed that we would be putting together data that, that you can really take the right decision. And some cases we know that aviation will not provide the best solution. So this is something we are doing, and we are very, very proud for having this cooperation with the two agencies on that.
Absolutely. I want to hear from the side of it on this question, indeed.
I just can agree with Luc. It is important that the passengers can take an informed decision. So we need to put on the table for a particular combination of destination, you need to see in the various options, either you have to invest more time, but then you possibly use less CO2, or if you are really under time pressure, you can still try to optimize by combining the various segments. But the first step is to create the transparency, to create the comparability, because it's about being transparent, not doing greenwashing, but giving the right information to the passenger.
Absolutely, and in the end, the choice is on the consumers. I want to hear from you, Sigrid, as well on these. Are you collaborating also with other industries on this matter?
Well, it's a really good idea. I'm maybe ringing my colleagues up after this session. But I also think it's a very interesting question, because especially with individual mobility, like with cars, I mean, you can have one vehicle, but depending on how you use it, the green credentials may be very different. It's known today that 95% of vehicles is standing on the side of the road or in a parking lot or in a garage most of the time, because they are owned by private people. I think this will change a lot in the coming years when we see more automation coming in. Robo-taxis is a word that you hear a lot, or shuttles without drivers. So that's again mobility that's then shared, and the means are shared, so they'll be put to use more efficiently. Because different people are using them, and that will have an impact on their green credentials. But I mean, if you have an electric vehicle, for example, or better a hybrid vehicle, and you never charge it, so you only drive it on gasoline or diesel, then your green credentials won't be very high. So the individual circumstances, but also individual behavior and choices really play a role, and their digitalization can really do a lot. We all collect data already today with our phones. This is also happening with our cars, and it will be very important to collect that and to aggregate it, and then on that basis, indeed, build devices, apps that you can use to also monitor your own choices and your own behavior, and then make the best possible decisions based on that.
Absolutely. Great business idea. If anyone is watching, collecting data and making sure that we can access a website or an app where we can compare the footprint of the transport that we use, that'd be awesome. I know that this is something that we can actually do in terms of food and even clothes. So it's actually a great idea. So if you're going to be collecting those data, we could definitely ask the Commission maybe for funding. It is right that I'm saying this to make sure that we have that up and running very soon, maybe for the next holiday season. And actually about this question of funding, to just make the transition here. So we have a second winner. We have a second question coming from our audience. Make sure that you ask your question. We only have one spot left, one rail pass left. So make sure that if you have a question, a burning one, you check it and you leave it on a Slido, because this is your last chance. But the question that we're getting from our audience is, how about funding? Isn't it the thing that is limiting the speed of development in the industry, and there could be a risk of transportation just becoming not affordable and making it harder for people to travel all around Europe? And the question of aircraft, I think, it's a very big deal, especially when it comes about when we talk about taxation, right?
That's a painful part of the question. The questions, yes. Yeah, there is a price to pay. You want to be green, and we all want to be green. We have to change our way of flying. I mean, it has been done with easy, I would say, energy solution, developing hydrogen propulsion, developing sustainable aviation fuel, having electric aircraft. It's not cheap, and it requires a lot of investments which are engaged today. The good news is that the European Commission believe that there is really a lot of funding to be earmarked to this, and we are certainly very happy with that. Now, at the end, you as passenger, you will have certainly, you will see it on your ticket, because I think the price is not the same. The good news is that, I mean, if we work together, the road sector, the railway sector, maritime and aviation, we could get, if you want, a collective demand for the same type of fuel, which could possibly lead us to some savings. But that remains to be seen. And it's what also was said before by us, if we work together, we might have an impact on the supply and the production. Then maybe the ticket, your ticket will be not so expensive.
And it's something that we have to watch very closely indeed. What about you, Joseph? How do you see this is actually impacting?
Well, this is a very pertinent question. And indeed, in the railway sector, we distinguish two kinds of investment. The one that I would call hard investment, meaning new high-speed lines, new tunnels, increasing the speed to very high speeds of the trains. The other one is the soft investment. The soft investment is to make sure that we have good customer information, to make sure that we have good connections, to make sure that the passenger is informed when there is a disturbance. We know from various studies that it can cost hundreds of millions of euros to gain 1 minute in the travel time of a train. But if you gain 1 minute, but you lose 1 hour because you miss your connection, then this might be challenged. So I'm, again, much more in favor of finding the clever solution. And we heard many times this afternoon that digitalization could be a very wise investment, and digitalization could be the soft investment that actually creates the value for our customers.
Absolutely. And again, this is also part of the objectives of the European Recovery Fund that we are putting together just right now. So it's going to be an important thing to watch, because it's also related to green objectives. Maybe, Sigrid, you would like to jump on this one?
Yes, absolutely. I'd like to indeed also refer to the funding and the affordability part. I mean, funding is crucial, and it's indeed also important that from the Recovery and Resilience Fund that there's going to be support for further innovation, because that's really key. And that's, by the way, also what keeps European industry in general competitive compared to other regions like China and the US. But also funding for skills, because we're going through an enormous transformation. Today in the automotive sector, many people work or have jobs that somehow relate to combustion engine technology. They are going to go through a huge change towards electrification, or the battery value chain that needs to be built up. And another huge part of that industrial transformation is about digitalization. So also ICT skills are needed that are not used or required today. So we need to really invest massively in upskilling and reskilling, as it's then called, in addition to attracting young people that now come from the universities and already may have the right skills, and they also need to keep on learning. On the affordability part, which is more about then the vehicles that are used, that's incredibly important as well, because if mobility becomes too expensive, and again, I'm talking here also about cars, if you can't afford to buy an electric vehicle, you will resort to buying an older vehicle. And if too many people can't make that choice of renewing their devices, their vehicles in this case, then we will end up with an older fleet of cars on the roads, and that will not help us towards decarbonization or towards air quality improvement, which is about the pollutant emissions I talked about before. So affordability is very, very important, and that's why a transition here is important, with incentives, also putting renewable fuels into the mix that can really help not just the existing, not just new vehicles, but also the existing vehicles on the roads. We need to be smart and really use all possible options, including technology options, to make this transition towards climate neutrality work in a just way, to use EU jargon, which in simple terms indeed means that it's that mobility is sustainable but also affordable.
Absolutely. I think, again, you touched upon many issues that are very important. One is education, indeed, because with the transformation of the transport industry and with a transition towards a greener economy, digitalization is also very important. And all this is going to be reflected in the upskilling and reskilling of those workers that are going to be affected by this transition. But these, again, also have a social impact. And if affordability is not part of the equation, we might just find ourselves with a more unequal society. And this is indeed a very big issue that we're going to have to discuss ahead. We have our third question and final coming from the audience. Thank you so much for all of you who have been participating today, sharing your questions with us. And I'm going to ask that last question to our speakers today. And the question is, and this I think is going to be creating a little bit of debate, it is, could the CO2 emissions be significantly declined if traveling by train is more encouraged, which would affect the other two industries? So maybe, Luke, you would like to jump on this one.
So the question is about the reduction of CO2 now.
Indeed.
Yes, there are, as we have already displayed many times, we are doing a lot to reduce this CO2. And to reduce it, I mean, you have to change the way you fly. You could possibly change modernizing your fleet. And I think this is certainly something which is now taking place. And we have observed that because of this health crisis we are having now, the airlines are changing anyway their business model. And I mean, we have probably an opportunity here to have at the same time a change of their fleet to cope with the new type of travel, and at the same time to modernize in order to reduce the CO2 emission. So this is a combination of elements which could go in a good direction. But this is on the fleet, but also on airport. Airport has also undertaken since many times a decarbonization program, and they are now trying to comply with some requirements on their own. It's also discipline, self-discipline they impose on themselves. But they have agreed also to work with us to have a sort of labeling on the airport, which also could be something incentivizing airlines to decide to go to the greener airport. And that is something, of course, we are discussing with industry, with operators, how we can work together, because continuing to make such an effort will require to cooperate among the different actors, operators, regulator, and of course also the passengers who have to take the right decision ultimately. Yeah.
Absolutely. Maybe, Joseph, what do you like to say about this? Is encouraging trains the way to reduce CO2?
Yes, it's certainly one very efficient method, because we know that per passenger kilometer, the CO2 emission is, of course, much less for rail than it is for aviation and it is for car, at least under current assumptions with the current technology. Meaning that every person kilometer that is shifted to rail reduces the CO2 emission. But as Luc just said, we need a combination of measures. We need to make all transport modes greener. We need to make all transport modes less emitting of CO2. And we need, of course, to push the modal shift to the green transport modes, but in an efficient combination, because all modes of transport have their strengths. You cannot go by train from Brussels to Washington, D.C., so you need to fly. But the key question is, how can we combine the transport mode such that the overall impact on our planet Earth is minimum and that we prevent further global warming?
I see a strong collaboration here in between all the industries. No one is going to say, no, just stop traveling by plane, just stop traveling by car, you only use the trains. That's good to know anyway. Sigrid, what do you have to say about this? Is traveling by train the way to stop CO2 emissions?
Well, it's certainly important, and it's nice and fun to do as well. So great, but it won't bring you to your doorstep. So indeed, you need other means of transport as well, whether it's two-wheelers or your two legs and feet. Or a car in many instances. That depends also a lot on whether you live in a rural area or in an urbanized environment. But I think the most important point here is about the energy that goes into all of these means of transport. We need to defossilize the energy we need in order to achieve climate neutrality. And I think that's important, whether it's about trains or planes or about cars, and not all, certainly not today, not all electric engines run on green energy, and not all combustion engines need to run on fossil fuels. So the point is really that both engine types can, and in the future absolutely should, run on green energy. And then I think, you know, it doesn't really matter that much anymore. And if there is renewable energy available in abundance too, also the efficiency point will be less important. So it's making really that transformation for energy, including fuels, to be renewable and zero emissions. That will get us to where we need to be.
Absolutely. The question of energy, as we have been saying before during today's discussion, is very important, and also the incentives. I wanted to wrap up a little bit because we're coming closer to the end of this session, but I think it was very interesting, all the discussions that we were having today, touching on many, many different issues. First of all, the importance of the collaboration between the different industries when it comes to transport, and making sure that there is always an alternative, and that alternative is less polluting indeed. The question of making sure that circular economy is key to the strategy in making sure that transport is more sustainable, taking into consideration the social impact of all the measures, taking into consideration as well the need to improve the skills of the workers that are required to make sure that that transition is possible, but also that is affordable to the citizens and the consumers, and that they have a choice and that they are able to choose by themselves on the basis of clear data and relevant information about the footprint of the transport that they are using indeed. Thank you so much for your contributions. I think it was very interesting and a very important overview on where are we at right now when it comes to sustainability in the transport industry. And I would like to thank so much as well our viewers today and the public that has been participating in this session. I very much encourage you to keep on sharing the messages and the thoughts and the comments that you would like to address to our speakers, but also in general about this question of making transport more sustainable, again by using the hashtag DiscoverEU, EU Year of Rail, and also EU Green Week. We're going to keep on going for the next few days. And of course, I would like to thank so much Sophie, Jana, and Thanos. There has been those sharing their questions today. You have won a rail pass. Our team from the European Commission is going to be contacting you bilaterally, and you're going to be able to discover the European Union very soon by not polluting, or at least polluting a little less. Thank you so much again for being here today with us, to our amazing speakers. Thank you so much to Karen as well, who was sharing her thoughts about DiscoverEU before with us. And thank you again to our viewers and our participants to be part of this conversation and to make this discussion very lively. Thank you again. Thank you so much.